I'm David Liggett with Data Center Hawk, and I am here with Rob Morris, Managing Partner with Skybox Datacenters. We're talking about a lot next. Rob Morris, Managing Partner with Skybox Datacenters. Welcome to Hawk Talk. This is Data Center Hawk's conversation with data center industry leaders and experts. So excited that you've joined us. We've aligned schedules, which is probably the biggest challenge with everyone I sit with.
A miracle in and of
Yes,
itself.
is always just trying to peg the people that we want to get with. But we're really excited you're here. Thanks for taking the time to come in.
Glad to be here and humbled to be here. Thank you.
You bet. So, you have been leading Skybox now for a number of years. You've had some really exciting recent successes that we'll talk about here in a minute. But how in the heck did you get into the data center business? It's always, I love this question, and it's a great one for what we're doing. But I don't think people realize, the path that a lot of the leaders and experts in the space took to get into the space. But tell our, crew out there that's listening, how did you end up in the data center industry?
Yeah, I mean, from an early age, I always was drawn to technology.
Yeah.
It's something, tinkering with small electronics and going to building computers.
Okay.
And understanding how a wide array of components from all over the world come together to build this thing that sits on your desktop and does just incredible things.
Yes.
And in the generation that we grew up in, we were the PC generation.
Yeah.
And things were happening there, and we were beating and exceeding Moore's law every year, which isn't necessarily the truth anymore. But there was the mainframe era, and then this PC era. So that was kind of a cool thing to grow up in because it was happening right there in your home.
Yeah.
And then just growing up in Texas,
Yeah.
I mean, there's just real estate and real estate development culture all around us.
Yeah.
So combining those two things, one, the technology piece is seemingly infinite thing, and real estate is this finite resource, and so that was always interesting to me. But got started, went to school at Texas A&M, studied business finance, and got to work for a developer in College Station, and got exposure not only to marketing and leasing, but also development and a little bit of operations.
And that's while you were in college?
Yeah, while I was in school.
Cool.
So I got the opportunity to work full time there my senior year, and occasionally attend class and get that diploma. So
that's awesome.
It was incredible, just real world experience. And then took an opportunity to go work at Cushman Wakefield.
Okay, out of school.
Right out of school, and got to join a team of tenant rep or really consultants around site selection for Fortune 500 companies, but as a generalist in office and industrial. And at the same time, coming out of school, and then all of a sudden the world just implodes. Yeah. Specifically commercial real estate. But I was tasked with industrial. And industrial at that point in time, the deals that were happening were just odd because they were these data center companies, whether they'd be backed by venture capital or private equity. There really weren't big REITs at that point in time besides digital. And they were leasing and buying these seemingly unusable industrial buildings and retrofitting them and turning them into these just incredible data center facilities.
Which actually is an interesting, point as it relates to how the market has changed, because back during that time there was the retrofit mindset, like, hey, the best path to getting something to the market is to find a building that's close to power and connectivity, and we're going to then put money into it. And then as time went on, it's going, hey, we're going to spend about the same amount to do this versus building something purpose built, and
exactly
it's completely changed today than where it was back then.
Yeah, there were just a lot of assets out there and available that did make sense for retrofit. Yeah, that's not the case anymore. A lot of those have been converted, or the ones that are out there, you can build them for less.
So you're with Cushman. You're seeing these industrial deals take place. You're watching the data center providers really take these buildings and some users and do this? And what are you thinking at this point? Has the light bulb come on that, hey, this is an industry I want to be plugged into with your engineering kind of mindset background? And
yeah, I mean, it was very magnetic, just given my nerdy interest in technology, but also just the dynamics. You look at technology at that point in time, despite what was happening with the recession, technology was continuing to do its hockey stick.
Yeah.
And so there were companies out there that we were exposed to that, despite the fact that their technology needs were growing, the capital simply wasn't available.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest and baddest Fortune 100 firms could not go allocate $100 million or whatever it was at that point in time for them to go build a data center.
Yeah.
They had to go lease it,
Yeah.
even if they didn't necessarily want to.
Yep.
And so we saw that opportunity. At that point in time, Cushman didn't have a formalized data center practice. So, we decided to develop that practice and put together that team. And very quickly, we were working with Fortune 500 companies and large global co-location providers that were new to Cushman.
Yeah.
And they were sending us all over the place. It was an incredible experience that built itself very quickly. I think I learned the most in my time working for Savis, CenturyLink. And so, we were doing deals all over the globe. I was spending a lot of time down in Sao Paulo, doing deals in UK and Slough, and got to work with folks up in the Northwest like Sabi, and doing powered shell deals and retail deals and wholesale. And you really got to see what worked and what did not work. Yeah. And that sort of laid the groundwork for where we wanted to take Skybox.
So go to that point. At some point you decide, hey, we're going to entrepreneurially start a new company. Yeah. What was the catalyst behind that, and talk about how that took place.
Yeah. So I'd moved from Cushman to Cassidy Turley and led their data center practice there for the U.S. and really enjoyed my time there. Just had a great group of individuals that I was able to work with across the country as well as locally. And in the course of, really a lot of my work was outside of the Texas markets, but came across this particular asset that, we just thought it was a retrofit opportunity. We thought it had great bones, great power available. And it was a point in time where it was, appropriate in my life, which is a big thing to look at, if you were going to go start a new venture.
Oh, yes.
When
you do it, that's an important part of it.
Timing is everything. And in my life and, my colleagues' lives, it was that right time. And we said, okay, now is that time. And it's a big leap. And as you know, you think it's a big leap, and then you take it and you go, wow, that's significant.
Bigger than I thought.
But we went and raised capital for the project, a pretty significant sum. And we were able to retrofit that facility and sell it to a data center operator that came into the market and needed space and product as absolutely fast as possible. We enabled that speed to market. And at that point, we were on our own. We're going, okay, that was a really fun project, but we should really create a platform around this. Really being able to do the operations, the leasing, the management, as well as development for greenfield, because we saw that trend that being able to find another building like that one was going to be very hard to do. And that's when we decided to start Skybox.
What's this is a little bit off topic, but what's, when you think about starting your company and the path that you've taken to do it from a business standpoint, what's a lesson you've learned, or what's a couple of lessons that stick out to you as far as, I'm an entrepreneur, we started this, we're however many years in. When I think back on that time, this is what I've learned through that. I mean, what is one lesson that sticks out, or something that you go, I really either didn't anticipate this, or I did anticipate this, and this is exactly how my journey has led me, and this is what I've learned through it.
Yeah. Probably the biggest one I can think of is learning to follow your gut and becoming comfortable with those inherent decisions. Because you can spend so much time going through so many different cycles of a critical decision that as an entrepreneur you have starting a company, relatively limited resources.
Yes, you bet.
And so going through the consensus exercise, if you find yourself a few iterations through coming back to your original path, that should tell you something about, okay, I might be good at this particular thing, and I should get more comfortable with making those decisions faster, because time is everything.
Yes,
it's our most valuable resource.
Yep.
And that's probably the biggest thing that we have learned, is getting more comfortable with making those decisions faster.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, I think we've learned that too. I've learned that personally, as it relates to decisions we need to make, and knowing that, most of the time we're going to get them right. Yeah. Some of the times we're going to swing and miss, and that's just life. You make decisions, whether it's related to business or other things, and sometimes, it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
But, the fear of it not working out can't halt, the decisions that need to be made to move a business forward. It's just a really important part of businesses succeeding. So, so now Skybox now has, prominent locations in both Dallas and Houston. So congratulations on that. I know that's been a lot of work for you and your team. But tell us about how you all see the data center universe today. You all have been successful at selling projects, leasing infrastructure to Fortune 500 companies. There's some changes taking place with that I think we'd both agree with. What does the landscape look like today for a smaller data center operator when you think about the publicly traded operators that are out there, and how do you do your best to attract large opportunities but also enterprise data center deals as well?
Yeah. So great question. I mean, it's what you have to think about each and every day you get up is how do I compete in this market, and how do I add value for our customers? And one thing we decided early on was our end goal objective was not to be a large publicly traded company. It's just it's not fundamentally what me or my partners want to do in terms of the cultural setup or how we run our day-to-day lives. So we built Skybox as this more flexible private organization, really all the way down to its foundation in terms of our capital structure. We have not only as a private developer, but as a fundless sponsor, we have complete and total control and flexibility in terms of what capital we use for any particular project, whether it be a speculatively built data center or data center campus, whether it be a build-to-suit opportunity, or whether it be acquiring an existing operating asset. We're not beholden to one single capital source. We can select the right profile project for the right profile investor, which ultimately leads to a altogether better experience for the end user. Because all too many times we see, something happening in market A that affects market B that is no reality in this market. I mean, just unnatural things in the course of a portfolio of assets. And it does, provide you things like, advantages in terms of cost of capital, et cetera. But this industry has matured so much that those differentiators really aren't true as much as they once were.
Yeah.
And that's just the cycle of commercial real estate, which data centers fall into, is the maturity of the capital markets.
Sure.
For office buildings, if you own an office building in New York and a multi-billion-dollar REIT owns an office building down the street, it's not really going to fundamentally change the cost of your debt or the cost of your equity. And so, but that wasn't that way 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's been something that we have been working to play into, because ultimately, when we have a customer come through the doors, we're able to really design a bespoke solution for them.
Yeah, that's good.
In a way that other groups cannot.
Yeah, and you all, have been successful recently with your Houston project, and you did a very interesting. I think if you're in the weeds like we are in the data center world every day, this project was a bit unique. But you all were able to, close what is most likely the largest, power transaction that's been done in the Houston market, which says a lot. Talk about that opportunity and what, from your perspective, looking back, what are some of the highlights of that transaction?
It was a very unique deal. We just come off of our latest Dallas transaction and enabling a very large user there very quickly, and we had thought that was.
You're good.
Excuse me.
All good.
We had thought that was going to be a unique experience, but what we got to experience in Houston happened at an even faster pace.
Yeah.
So we had a unique customer, a unique data center that was going to enable what will become the world's largest and fastest supercomputer.
Yeah.
At 250 petaflops. So
yeah.
that in and of itself can be a daunting task.
Yeah.
But working with, we can talk publicly about
yeah.
it. But with,
this is out in the news, so there's no, there's nothing that's being shared that's breaking anyone's trust or anything like that.
Yeah. So down under GeoSolutions, they're an Australian-based oil and gas geoseismic company. And they've got data centers all over the globe. They've got Perth, they've got Malaysia, they've got London, and they've got Houston. And these facilities run at densities, over 1,000 watts a square foot. Mm-hmm. But they need to do something that was dramatically larger than that. And in the end, for this project, it wasn't a down select between Skybox and another data center in Houston, or even Skybox and another data center in North America. We were competing against a facility in Malaysia that enabled some similar things and ultimately won out because of cost of power and speed to market.
Yeah, sure.
We'd spent a lot of money and time and effort and resources 18 months ago to put in a huge additional duct bank of power from our substation. And so whenever they came in, they realized, okay, these guys know how to do it. They just did something very similar in another market, and they can do it in the amount of time that is required. We had this first meeting with them in May, and within the course of that 60-minute meeting, it was readily apparent both parties knew this is what was going to be happening.
Yeah.
And we moved almost the very next week into bi-weekly construction meetings at all kinds of odd hours of night. We closed the deal in August, and then it'll deliver in February of this year.
So what are you having to do to transform that space to meet the power densities and the power requirement that is taken by the client? What are y'all having to do in order to serve them in that way?
Yeah, it's so down there we've got a wide variety of products. It's very different from what we do in the Dallas market with powered shell, but we've got large wholesale traditional 2N infrastructure customers like NRG. In Data Hall 3, we have a variety of retail customers, anything from 5 kW up to 100, and servicing the needs of those customers. And then we had additional space in the building, what is Data Hall 2 and Data Hall 4, that we were able to, all of our buildings have a dual-sided service yard design, so it gives us a lot more flexibility in the infrastructure over long-term in the life of that asset. And it was a purpose-built facility too, which helped out a lot. But we, on that north side of the facility, because we had speculatively brought in all this additional infrastructure in between, we brought in twice the amount of power infrastructure there as we had for the south side, anticipating HPC, high-performance compute. And so really a lot of it was customization around the fact that, this group really wanted to focus in on 415-volt service, which we had also just done in Dallas. Where most of our new larger scale projects, we're really honing in on 415 just because of the advantages in transformation. And so, we had to work pretty hard at that with the utility and with our existing facilities extension in order to make that possible. And then the immersion cooling aspect.
Talk about that. Yeah.
That's a quite frankly, I think it's definitely a very, very small part of the market, but I believe it's something that we're going to see growing quite a bit.
Okay.
We had just gotten through a large immersion cooling project with our Dallas facility that was a two-phase solution, and then this was a single-phase dielectric fluid solution, and so it enables, PUEs of 1.04 to 1.05. Who knows, it might even be lower, but in some of their existing operating facilities, they're hitting those numbers today, actually hitting.
Yeah.
And that's, part of the fact, the technology, and another part of the fact that when their compute is running it, they're using 100% of their available capacity.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of loss there. But, it's actually, the build is on traditional raised floor, because that enables more efficient infrastructure to go in under the floor.
Yeah. And essentially the servers the racks this way, and they're sitting in the immersion cooling.
And there's photos for anybody who wants to learn about it, photos available online of exactly what it looks like. But there are these tanks, that do 22 to 23 kW per tank, and they're a pretty compact footprint. The equivalent watts per square foot for this data hall will be a little over 1,000 watts per square foot. In terms of critical load.
Awesome.
So it's just incredible density.
Yeah.
But Doug is very comfortable with this technology. They've been operating it in multiple environments. The team that we have in Houston is our same team as Dallas, who had just gotten done doing.
So familiar with something like this.
Yeah. So it just matched up really well.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's Houston's such an interesting market. 4 or 5 years ago, it was, I think, seeing growth that none of us, anticipated, maybe at the levels that we had, because the price of oil had gotten so high, and then obviously with that changing, that I think changed some of the opportunities, even though there were companies that were still, oil and gas companies that were still trying to figure out what they were going to do in the future.
Yeah.
But it certainly feels like activity there's picking up, and there's I think those that have made it through this cycle in that market, I think stand to benefit moving forward. So
it's been a very interesting and dynamic market for us. It's like nothing else that I have seen in a secondary market, and the customers in the Houston market, I think understand the HPC and high performance technology better than any other in the world. And so it's a fun market to push the envelope in terms of what's possible.
Sure. And you to an extent you've done that in Dallas. You recently sold a building at your legacy campus in the Plano area of Dallas, which is one that's seen a significant amount of commercial development, not just from a data center perspective, but from an office perspective as well. How do you anticipate moving forward on that campus? I know that y'all are talking about potentially starting the second building there, but talk about that.
Yeah, so we've got a pretty sizable campus to work with, which is great. But at the same time, you have to really think hard about what you do. The most important piece being the first step, which I think was executed extremely well. The second piece can also be more important because it sets the tone for what happens in 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
And so we've spent a lot of time doing that. And the Legacy 2 facility, we will be breaking ground on that early next year.
Okay.
And it's really going to be catering towards not just hyperscale, but we've also done some things there to enable traditional enterprise compute.
Sure, you bet.
Which is something that we've always enjoyed at Skybox, and enable a facility that can do probably 2 or 3 things instead of one really big thing.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be very successful in the market. So it's a really important step for us. It's our third data center in Dallas, second one on that particular campus. But I think given everything that's happening in the community around it, I mean, there's a new office tower going up next door every day. It's the first time we'll be doing 2-story. And so, as we see, I don't know that you and I ever would have believed this 10 years ago, but there are limited number of data center sites available in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, I think you just you just highlighted 3 things that I think are taking place in the market that are consistent with some of the quarterly updates we just sent out. One is that data center operators are having to be flexible with their design and really think through how do we serve multiple customer types. And because I think that's something that is on the minds of all, because the market is changing. The second thing you mentioned was the fact that you've got to be able to work hard as it relates to facility growth and kind of campus planning.
Yeah.
And because one decision here does impact what you can do in the future.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a very important part of how you all serve customers moving forward, especially as the sizes of transactions get bigger. And the third thing you said is there's just not a lot of data center sites available. And I really believe that. In fact, 5 years from now, I scratched my head a little bit to think at what the market, the constraint from a site perspective will have on pricing, have on, where you can really place data center campuses. I mean, even in places like Ashburn, Chicago, Silicon Valley for sure, Dallas.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of sites, that make sense when you just look at them for what they are today. Now, obviously, you can bring power and you can bring connectivity. It costs money. It's time.
Right.
And those two things are what the data center operator community is really pushing against, right? We want to build these as efficient as we can.
Right.
And we want to get them to the market as quick as we can. So anyway, I think, I mean, that is what's happening. And the multi-story data center too. I mean, especially in Dallas where there's land everywhere, right? Well, there's really not.
Right.
And from a cost perspective, there's obviously some efficiencies and, having the ability to build up versus out.
Yeah.
So.
And I think there's certain things that we've taken just as a community for granted, specifically around power, that are going to be changing probably faster than most are anticipating. We're seeing it in real time in some other developments in some markets. And it's, the days of being able to put up a building and having the utility provide that power from the utility substation are quickly coming to a close. Both of the...
And why do you see that happening? Like, what's creating that?
The incentive system isn't there in most markets.
Okay.
When you're dealing with a regulated utility or even a deregulated utility, and with deregulated utilities, the way their cost structure set up provides for really, really low power costs, but much more challenging incentive to speculatively build out that infrastructure without prior commitments. And so, that's something that I think we have really excelled at, is manage that process with utilities and all the intricacies of the facilities extension agreements, making sure we do have that. That's part of the reason I think multi-story. Our Dallas location is in a part of the world where we do have the benefit of that utility infrastructure. So we're going to make sure we can utilize as much of that as possible by going vertical. But in 2 other new projects we're working outside of those markets on right now, we're having to build substations.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's something that's going to become more and more of the norm, like you see in markets on the West and East Coast.
Yeah.
And people are going to have to learn how to adapt to that.
When you're building a substation, or when the electric company is building the substation, what type of timing does that add? I mean, obviously it adds timing because it takes time to do that. But traditionally, what would you place from a time perspective? Is that an additional 3 months, additional 6 months, additional 12 months? Where would you place the timing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it varies wildly depending on market.
Okay.
We have one market we're working in where it's 6 to 9 months, which is definitely not the norm.
Yeah.
We had some unique things we were able to do there, but generally 18 and sometimes as much as 24 months.
Okay.
And a lot of that just has to do with the long lead time of those transformers.
Sure, you bet. When you think about the U.S. data center market, maybe Canadian data center markets as well, what stands out to you as interesting markets moving forward? And again, not that you need to give up any trade secrets, but where do you think right now? Your base has been in Texas. You've got some other stuff taking place, but how do you see the world as far as expanding that moving forward? Do you want to be in a market like in Northern Virginia, where most data center operators are today because they feel like there's a lot of user demand there? Do you want to stay in secondary markets? How are you seeing the world related to market growth?
I think that component of our business has become relatively and maybe even dangerously simple, because the days of locating a data center out in the middle of nowhere for a tax benefit or a power benefit, the hyperscale platform and their applications have found that, okay, we really need to have these data centers being served where the people are in major metros. It's very counterintuitive to what people think of as the cloud, but you and I both know that cloud application we're using probably resides somewhere within a 30, 40-mile radius of where we are. And so that makes the site selection component far simpler, but it also challenges in that everybody's going to run to that particular location.
Yes.
Which is what we're seeing in a lot of markets. And so, we, the major markets are a focal point of ours, those top 4 or 5.
Yep.
What I think our platform will continue to do is try to build into a niche for each of those.
Okay.
Offering something that you're typically not going to find available. I mean, we tell customers and prospective customers this all the time is, Skybox is not a fit for every customer, but for an exceptional 2 or 3 for that particular location, we are by and far,
you bet,
going to be the best option for them, and that's going to be our focus going forward, is finding those kinds of opportunities.
We think about, at least at Data Center Hawk, the difference between the hyperscale demand that's taken place in the last 18 to 24 months, as well as the enterprise demand. And I think in the midst of all these big opportunities that are out there, I wouldn't say the enterprise demand is getting left behind, but it's changing.
Yeah.
And it looks different today than it did 2 years ago. In your experience, what are you seeing enterprise users really need today? And, in the past, I would say they wanted, reliability that was, their data center can never go down.
Yeah.
They wanted, as low cost a solution as they could that fit what they needed it to. They needed the ability to, give control to somebody else, but still have some control over it.
Yeah.
What are you seeing them do today that's different than that?
That's an honestly very interesting question, because the needs of enterprise companies have, really bifurcated themselves into a group that, will take anything and everything.
Yeah.
And they're going to go for, whatever label that day happens to be the lowest and the location that they can check off the box with their C-suite. And I'd say that segment of the market, by and large, is shrinking.
Yeah.
The set of the market that we see expanding are the enterprise customers that need something that is more unique, whether it be the quantity of the power or the type of infrastructure or just the pure raw flexibility.
Yeah.
We see powered shell really coming back in vogue in these markets, which is just bizarre, because that's where we started off.
From it.
And I think that's attractive. Going up to the hyperscale community, they're looking for that kind of flexibility, and so when you have those two different paths, I think you're able to set your internal objectives pretty quickly on where your company can add the most value to those customers.
It was interesting yesterday. I spent time we talked about this before, but with some other data center leaders leading companies, and some of the things that I heard them say were how important moving forward it is. And this was more related to the hyperscale side of things, but it was about timing. Can you get what they need to the market fast enough? Control. Can you give these companies under your umbrella as much control as you can, so that they feel like you're serving the real estate, the facility need, the infrastructure need, but then they have control within maybe more than they've had in the past. And then flexibility, and how flexible can you be to let them grow with you moving forward. On the enterprise side of things, I think it's just very interesting to see some of those dynamics change. And some of this enterprise demand, as it gets smaller, it's feeding these larger deals. That they're taking applications and shrinking them here and placing whatever they're not using here into some of the larger demand that's out there today from a hyperscale standpoint. But
the control thing that you just hit on is pretty unique, because that there's so much time that we spend thinking about how we design and build these facilities on day one. Which if you do that right, you can enable a lot of flexibility. But I think just the most undervalued and probably underappreciated segment of our space is really the critical facilities operations, because that control that you're talking about at the end of the day has to do with the culture that you build in your critical facilities team. And that's something that very early on we had decided, we're going to build, because our larger agreements are always typically triple net, with complete transparency on all operational costs and all the controls that the customer desires and how they dial things up or dial things back. And I think with these larger users, they're really looking for that level. And at the end of the day, you can't enable that unless the culture of your critical facilities team is set up to do that and really interact with that customer at a high level. And that's something that we've really enjoyed.
Yeah. How important is network and the connectivity piece to the data center user story today? It's my general belief that more than ever, that's becoming a more important part of the discussion.
Yeah.
How do you see that today?
Yeah, connectivity is everything. I mean, that and power, and you can put together a data center. But I think what we have come to appreciate is, and Dallas market is blessed with tremendous amounts of connectivity and fiber. Houston's definitely more challenging, but the products that have been layered on top of the glass, so if you think of network as a stack, the fundamental foundation of that is the actual fiber that comes in. What we have really come to understand is there are so many things you can put on top of that in terms of services offering, direct connect, whatever that may be. Yeah. Early on, you had to have certain types of providers in the building to enable that, and very, very quickly, there's been so much innovation in that segment, you can pretty much offer virtually all of those services so long as you have a healthy and complex or diversified set of providers within the building.
Yeah, sure.
And that's been, as Megaport and others have come to market, that's something that's been really interesting for us is a lot of, older facilities that you would think, they've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Or, that's an older data center. They've been able to, because of the mobility of those platforms to hop onto existing infrastructure, enable that technology very quickly. Yeah. And that's pretty cool to see. I mean, that's technology advancing quickly.
Yeah. So, just when you think about the market, where you are today, where you want to be, 5 years from now, what gets you most excited about being in this space and having a company that's growing and continuing to think entrepreneurially, that is a long word, about how to grow and move forward. What gets you most excited?
At the end of the day, what gets me out of bed is the customer experience.
Yeah.
Because we like to focus on fewer transactions and fewer projects, but typically larger ones relative to the size of our firm.
Yep.
We get just this deep level of interaction with our customers. And that's incredibly rewarding. And we want to continue to create products that enable that, because simply put, it's what we're best at.
You bet.
Retail co-location, everything else, that's a great business. We do it well. But the bespoke custom builds with unique challenges, that's what gets us going. And so we're pretty excited about these next couple of projects that we have coming up outside of the Texas market, and what those are going to enable, because it'll be very much in that same theme.
Yep.
And just building a great team and a great culture around that. We love the folks we work with, and we love who we work for. Yeah. We want to keep that going.
Yeah. Well, Rob Morris, thank you very much for stopping by and doing this. We wish you guys nothing but great success moving forward, and it'll be fun to see y'all grow and be successful.
Absolutely.